Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this hearing to examine unfair financial practices that may be harming our military community. It's something that I'm sure all of us as members of this committee care about. I also want to thank our witnesses for being here today to testify. South Dakota is home to Ellsworth Air Force Base, where there are more than 9,000 military personnel, family members, and civilian employees. In addition, there are 4,250 Air Guard and Army Guard members who serve in my home state. I'm proud of their courage and grateful for their sacrifice and service to our country. I certainly do not want to see them or their families subjected to unfair financial practices. This hearing will highlight the types of unfair practices and financial fraud that may be targeting our military men and women, the education and assistance programs available, and the law enforcement efforts undertaken to eliminate the worst practices and scams. Service members, like all consumers, are not immune to the problems encountered by taking on too much debt. However, the unique demands of military service may exacerbate the negative consequences from too much debt. For service members, unlike ordinary consumers, failing to pay any kind of debt is considered an offense under the Uniform Code of Military Justice, which could lead to a loss of a security clearance or even result in administrative discharge. Admiral Mike Mullen, then Chief of Naval Operations, was quoted voicing strong concerns about these issues in a June 2006 article of Sea Power, where he stated, and I quote, "A sailor's financial readiness directly impacts unit readiness and the Navy's ability to accomplish its mission," end quote. As mentioned in the article, financial difficulties were the #1 reason that sailors were losing their security clearance, and this was affecting the availability of service members for overseas deployments. Due to the efforts of Senators Jim Talent and Bill Nelson, Congress took notice of those challenges and enacted the Military Lending Act in 2006, which was an important step in protecting against predatory lenders. While that law has largely been a success, the Department of Defense is currently considering whether its rule implementing the Military Lending Act needs to be updated. The Department of Defense takes the issue of financial readiness seriously. I appreciate that the Department's made great strides to enhance its education, training, and counseling by beginning financial training right from the start during basic training and continuing throughout the service member's career. As the issue of whether further solutions are warranted is examined, it's important to ensure that there is a proper balance with access to appropriate credit while also protecting service members from unfair practices and outright fraud. I hope we can use this hearing today to highlight the financial assistance and education efforts that are available to service members to make informed decisions and to protect against fraud. For instance, the military has legal assistance offices that offer financial education and counseling. I look forward to hearing from Captain Alexander, who serves in the Navy's Mid-Atlantic Regional Legal Services Office, about his role in supporting and advising service members when they fall victim to financial fraud. I also look forward to hearing more about the consumer protection initiatives from the Federal Trade Commission and the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau. We're privileged to have Mrs. Holly Petraeus here today to tell us of her efforts with the Office of Service Member Affairs at the CFPB. I know that she's visited personally with the service members stationed at Ellsworth, as well as dozens of other military installations. I'd also like to call attention to Military Consumer Protection Day, which was held for the first time this past July. Its website provides education and resources to service members and their families to protect them against fraud. In closing, we can all agree that financial readiness is an important issue for our military and our national security, and that these brave men and women that protect us all over the world should not be the victims of unfair practices at home. So, Mr. Chairman, I thank you again for holding this hearing. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses and what certain states are doing to rein in unscrupulous practices. And I would ask, too, I have a statement here by the American Financial Services Association that I'd like to have included as part of the record.
So ordered.
Thank you. Captain Alexander, my understanding is that the Armed Forces Disciplinary Control Board identifies to base commanders businesses that may be especially harmful to service members and places such businesses off limits to service members. Can you elaborate how you work with the Board to identify businesses that may be placed on the off-limits list?
Yes, sir. We have a consumer complaint form that we have sent out to all the commands in the area. So whether it's a command financial specialist at the command advising the service member on an issue that they see, or they come into our office, the first step is to document what the problem is by putting on that form. That form, the front part of that form is also the notification to the Armed Forces Disciplinary Control Board that there is a problem. The precepts of the board say we can't take on individual issues, so we can't take on this sailor's case, But if we get 3 or 4 or a very egregious act that we think would be impacting multiple service members, then the board will send an invitation for that party to come forth and explain what the process is. This is one of the reasons why we've been very successful in addressing some of the car dealers in our area, is that when you put one car dealer off limits, their sales may drop from 40 or 60 cars a month to 12. And that impacts their bottom line, and then they begin to think about restructuring the way they do their processes. So we work with the board carefully in doing that, in documenting the cases, and then in bringing them to the board for action against individual businesses that are causing problems, sir.
Mrs. Petraeus, thank you, by the way. You mentioned in your testimony that during your visits to different bases, issues related to high-cost lending come up at nearly every stop. And I'm wondering if the CFPB has collected or released any statistics on the number of service members affected by these issues, and what does the data suggest or reflect in terms of trends in the past few years? Is this problem getting much worse? Has it stayed the same?
We are a young agency, so our data or what we've found out from our complaints that have been filed with us by service members. We've gotten at this point just over 11,000 complaints from service members, and mortgages top the list, challenges with mortgages, but we only started taking complaints about debt collection several months ago, and that's already trending upwards so fast that it's the #2 complaint item that we're getting. So I think there's definitely a sign there that that is something that impacts service members quite a bit. And in fact, it's rather timely because we just did put out an advance notice of proposed rulemaking on debt collection, and we are soliciting comments from the public through the 10th of February. So we certainly are very interested in having a military component to the comments that we receive, because anecdotally and from what we've gotten in our military complaints, it's pretty obvious that debt collection is one of the biggest challenges that service members seem to be impacted by.
And do you see, like, just from base to base or state to state differences in what you attribute those to, if you do?
It would be hard for me to expound on that right now. I think certainly I see differences between some of the issues that impact, for example, the National Guard, the reserves versus active duty. They're definitely more impacted by employment issues and issues, GI Bill issues, heavily marketed to by for-profit colleges. When they go to use their GI Bill, that's something that we've heard a lot about from the Guard. So state by state, we could certainly take a look at the complaints and get back to you on that, but I haven't seen any, any dramatic differences from one state to the next.
Okay. Do you work with the Bureau's Office of Consumer Response to encourage service members to file complaints regarding their concerns and then to help ensure the resolution of those complaints from service members?
Yes, very much so. I do have 2 folks within my office working on consumer response issues. One of them pretty much does a full-time job working with the Office of Consumer Response. She is a recent Army JAG, so she's a really excellent person to be doing this because she has a real knowledge of the laws that affect the military and can be value added both in their review of complaints that come through, but also in training up our consumer response folks about some of the military specific issues that may come in with complaints.
And when does the CFPB share that information about these complaints with military officials?
If there's a Service Member Civil Relief Act component, especially since that's something we don't enforce, we do share that with DOD and the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division. We have a real 3-way conversation with them. In fact, one of the first things we did was sign a joint statement of principles with those 2 entities, so we would be sure that there were no military complaints that would fall through the cracks just because it wasn't an area that we specifically covered.
Okay. And I would just direct this to the panel in its entirety and whoever would like to, but not all short-term loans are by definition predatory. So if a service member is looking for a short-term loan, what types of things should they be on the lookout for?
Ranking Member Thune, I would suggest a couple of things. Obviously, in a transactional situation where there is high-pressure sales tactics, that ought to be a red flag. If it's you have to sign now or you'll lose the deal, then that's clearly a red flag. And I would encourage a service member who is presented with any sort of contract or finance agreement that in any way is confusing, to ask for the opportunity to take it back to the base and have someone look at it. And if the merchant's unwilling to do that, I would say that's a very big red flag.
Anybody else want to add anything else to that?
I'd like to just weigh in. The first thing that they sometimes forget to consider is that every branch of the service has a military relief society that makes emergency loans and grants at 0% interest. So if it's a true emergency, that should be the first place they're looking, and sadly, sometimes it's not. In fact, when I was up at Fort Drum, we had a young soldier who just got up at the town hall to tell his story, which was that he needed a loan it was a family emergency. He didn't even think to go on post. He went on the internet, and he got a horribly expensive loan, ended up paying more in fees than the loan was actually for, and he could have gotten a zero-interest loan had he known to go on post. So that's the first place I would like them to look if it's a true emergency. Obviously, possibly their on-base bank or credit union would be another source of a loan at reasonable rates, but definitely what I don't want them to be doing is trolling the internet and looking for one of those tens of thousands or even millions of offers that offer military loans and are very bad deals.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.